Ya Hazireen Majlis, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The topic that we have, can everyone hear okay?
Yes.
The topic that we have been reflecting on throughout this month of Muharram, Alhamdulillah, is finding peace in an imperfect world, balancing acceptance, action, and hope. And the reason for choosing this topic is because, we live in a world which is full of turmoil, of conflict. Everywhere we see that things are chaotic and that we are not happy. And yet, the human being has been created by Allah to seek peace, to seek happiness, to seek well being. And how can we do that given that A, this world is temporary, and B, that this world is what it is? So we have been talking about how we can, basically practice acceptance of things that are not in our control, and things that are within our control, we actually work to make our lives better. Because very often, and especially I think this is, probably a case in Shias more than others, that we think somehow that if we are unhappy or miserable, that we will get rewarded for it in the hereafter, right? Sometimes we have this feeling, right? And the thing is that absolutely, reality is what Allah tells us is that every time a moment suffers anything, he will get rewarded for it. We know that a night that a moment spends in fever, his sins fall off like leaves from a tree. Alhamdulillah. This is the barakah of Allah, right? However, this does not mean that we passively accept whatever has come our way. When things are out of our control, absolutely, we practice acceptance, we practice sabr, we practice other things. But when things are within our control, it is our obligation to make our lives as best as we can. Okay? And so this has been kind of our theme of reflection for the last several majalis. And last time, many of you may have been here, it was in Oakville that we started talking about the sources of peace that Allah says, right? And one of the sources, two of the sources of peace that Allah talks about in the Quran is one, our home. He said that I have created homes as a place of rest for you, okay? And secondly, the very famous ayat that we all know, he says that within the marriage relationship, he has created spouses from amongst you so that you may find peace. So this is, and we spent quite a bit of time actually talking about this, that the three things, very important, the ayat is very familiar to all of us. An khalaqa lakum min anfusikum azwajan. So he's created mates so that li taskunu ilayha, so that you may find comfort in them. Okay, number one. Waja'ala bainakum. So he created, and this is Allah's gift to us when we establish a new family, when the new family begins with the relationship of marriage, with the relationship of nikah, then he gives us two gifts. Waja'ala bainakum mawaddatan wa rahmah. He gives us mawadda. Mawadda means what? It's expressed love. It comes from one of Allah's names, Wadud. Ya Wadudu, the source of all love. Okay, so he gives us that, and he gives us rahma. Rahma means what? Compassion, mercy, forgiveness between each other. So these are the two gifts that he gives us to kind of help us find sukoon amongst each other. However, what we see in many, many homes, and sometimes in our own homes, is that these gifts are not being nurtured. So there's this thing that all of us, when we are outside the house, we are kind of on our best behavior, right? We dare not speak back to our bosses, to children's school teachers, to whoever we may come in contact with, right? However, somehow when we enter that door of our homes, we kind of relax, right? And what that means, often, we have stresses outside the home. So we bring those stresses in. We have, been depleted. We're tired, hungry, right? And we bring all of that into the space of the home. However, this is not the way to create a peaceful home. This is not the way to find sukoon within your homes. Now, we've said in the past that, when any gift that is worth nurturing, any kind of blessing that Allah gives us, it takes a little bit of intentionality, gratitude, and effort to kind of keep the gift alive. This is true, by the way, in anything. You know, if Allah has given you the gift of health, if you ignore it, what happens? Eventually, it will catch up on you, right? If Allah has given you the blessing of a beautiful home, for example, even that needs to be looked after, you know, a house. So similarly, our relationships also need to be looked after. They won't automatically, this peace won't happen automatically. So last time we spent quite a bit of time talking about, you know, what kind of poisons the emotional climate of the home. You know, what are some of the things that we do unintentionally that take away the sukoon from our house? Okay. And so today I thought we would do the other part, which is, you know, we've spent quite a bit of time laying theory, you know, talking about. So today, you know, it's because many questions that I get frequently is, but how? How do I do this, right? We all know the theory, ladies, right? We have come to majalis, we have been reading the Quran all our lives, right? And so today, inshallah, we'll just look at very practical ways on how to keep this kind of peace alive. Okay. So why is it important to be intentional? Because anyone here who's not busy, who has like a lot of time on their hands, okay. So reality is that the world we live in, you know, it's called the time of the great, the era of the great time famine. Nobody seems to have time. And when we don't have time, a couple of things happen, right? Is that we become on autopilot. Do you know what I'm saying? So how many of us have like young families here? Young kids, okay. And so if you're a young parent, you know, chances are you don't know when morning happens and you don't know when night happens, right? You're just too busy doing the day-to-day, the mundane things of life. And before you know it, the day is done and another day, okay? And even if if you don't have, you know, families, if you don't have young families, if you're working, you know, same thing. It's called the rat race, right? The hamster wheel, that we just keep doing the same thing again and again. And you know, the Prophet ﷺ, he says it very beautifully. He says that people are asleep, and when they die, they wake up. We've all heard this hadith, right? What does that mean? It's a very similar kind of experience to being on autopilot, that we are not intentional. We don't know what we're doing. We're just kind of going with the flow, okay? Now, what research shows in relationships is that the difference between, you know, happy families and struggling families is not the number of problems they have. Very interesting, right? Generally, you know, when couples or families come for help, they always say, you know, help us solve our problems so that we can be happy. And the first piece of bad news I have to give them is, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to solve my own problems. I can't help you there, right? Reality is, Allah tells us in the Quran that He has created man in distress, fi kabad. In other words, while we are in this place of existence, you know, to expect that there will be a time in the future that will be trouble-free so that we can be happy is not going to happen. Okay, here's the bad news. Okay. However, if we are intentional, if we move out from this autopilot, we can actually experience Jannah on earth here. Okay. So what research shows is that, you know, the different things that happy families do on a daily basis are really simple little things. Simple things. It's not earth-shattering. However, and this, you know, I would always think that why even talk about these things? They're so basic, everyone knows. Here's the thing, we all know it. But when I look at my own life, when it's not working well, and I say, hey, let's get back to the basics. I'm actually not doing these things. Right? So, you know, they say common knowledge is not common sense or something like that, right? That common sense is not that commonly practiced. Common sense is right. So we all know it, and yet we don't do it. So what are some of the things that help families kind of have this. First of all, what is the most important relationship in the family? Sorry? Okay, yes. So somebody said mother, somebody said parents. No. How do we build a family? How does the family start? It's the spouse relationship. Now, way too many of us, as soon as we become parents, what happens? That the main relationship becomes secondary. We don't nurture it, we don't, foster it. And as a result of that, and we think we're doing it for the sake of the children, right? Now, here's one piece of thing which is very, very well validated by research. The best thing you can do for your children, the best thing you can do for your children is work on your marriage. Because what research shows is that, when the couple relationship is strong, it provides that stable base for the children. When we're talking about nurturing a safe home, many parents ask this question: how can I make sure that my children stay on the right path? How can I protect them? How can I make sure? There's so many very, very toxic elements in society right now, right? So here's the thing. And again, I say this, which is, sometimes really shocking to parents, but reality is we are not responsible for how our children turn out. Have you ever heard that before? You are not responsible for how your children turn out. So mothers, please relax, right? And I remember we use a lot of humor in my house, okay? So I remember when my son was very young, and I was just used to joke with them whenever my kids did something, I was like, I don't know where I went wrong. And my very young son told me, Mommy, please don't be so hard on yourself. Even Nabino couldn't control his son. Right? So this is very, very comforting for us. It doesn't mean we don't have responsibility. We absolutely do. We are accountable to our children. We are, but not for how they turn out. We can only do our part, and then the journey is up to them. And when we bring up our children with this kind of knowledge and knowing, our experience is so much more joyful and peaceful, right? Because as mothers, we put so much on our shoulders, which doesn't belong there, right? And the children, when we give this kind of vibe that I'm responsible for I'm responsible whether you pray or not, how is the child ever going to take responsibility if we are taking it on ourselves, right? So this was completely not my topic today, by the way. But the idea is that, the best thing we can do, what we are accountable for, is creating that safe haven, creating that stable base, which is a welcoming space for them, so that they don't have to go searching for connection and love outside. That we can do. That is enough. Because especially as women, we have a huge role to play. No matter what your role is, a woman in the house, we have a huge role to play in creating the emotional climate of the home. Okay. And so today we'll talk about some simple things we can do. Okay. And so we will talk about rituals. What is a ritual? So, obviously doing Majlis-e-Aza is a ritual, right? Is a religious ritual. But it turns out that, even on a daily basis, we have a lot of rituals that we do. Now, what's the difference between a routine and a ritual? So you make coffee every morning, you have coffee, you have breakfast, you do all of these things, but they may not be a ritual. What makes a ritual different from a routine is that it has some meaning for you. Okay, you're doing it intentionally. So for example, when I'm preparing, to come to a majlis, I have a lot of rituals that I do, right? And they have meaning for me in the sense that I know that I'm preparing myself so that I can give the message, right? So all of us unconsciously, we do things in routine. But the idea is that when in families, so all of us have breakfast, right? In families, or most of us, or dinner or something. So that might just be a routine if you're just doing it unconsciously, right? But when you make that into a ritual, then it has meaning and it blesses your family. This is how you nurture peace within the family. So, what are rituals? Something that is predictable. You know what's going to happen on any given time, right? Uh, and can you have a salawat, please? They provide a sense of connection. They provide a sense of identity. In other words, a sense of belonging to that family. And it is kind of an enactment of your values. So, for example, we all say we value family, right? But we have to look at how we're spending time within the family in order to make that happen. So, I'll give you an example. Like when my kids were young and when they were living at home, we had a ritual which was having waffles on a Saturday morning. Okay. Um, you know, it might be many families might be doing that, right? But for us, it was a very sacred ritual, just like having dinner together as a family was, right? So it was very predictable, unless people had kind of said that, Saturday morning we're not available or something major was going on. Saturday morning, we were all in the kitchen making breakfast. Everyone knew what was happening, what their roles was, who was going to whip the cream, who was going to cut the strawberries, things like that. Okay. And it gave us a sense of belonging and identity. So even when people came to visit and stay with us, they knew the Hassans had waffles on a Saturday morning. Do you know what I mean? So these are the kinds of things we're talking about. Okay. So what are some of the simple rituals? First of all, start the day on a positive note. I often tell myself that if I wake up like a grumpalump, you know what a grumpalump is, right? Please stay in bed till I adjust my attitude. Okay, because sometimes here's the thing, we have a lot on our plate. Some things which don't belong there, by the way, which we take on, and some things which we have to, right? So, when I wake up in a bad mood, things are only going to go downhill from there. Okay, so there's a there's a lot of ahadith on this, right? So Imam Ali alayhi salam said, the cause of love is cheerfulness. Okay. He also said, a good disposition brings about affection and love. In other words, so I have to look at myself. Remember, in Islam, self-awareness is like one of the most recommended actions, to the extent that it changes everything that we do. So if we do anything with self-awareness and intentionality, it will change the quality of the action and it will change the result that we get, right? So what this means is that we need to start the day with intention so that we are cheerful, okay? And I read something really good on Facebook, which said, and this is my version of it, that if you are a grumpala, right, go into your growlery. Okay, this is, I'd never heard this word before. But what is a growlery? It is a place of refuge or sanctuary to use when you are out of sorts or in ill humor. Okay, so how do we do that? Right? The idea is that when I recognized, I'm having a bad day, instead of kind of spreading that back, because remember, emotions, are contagious. There's the thing called emotional contagion, right? So emotions are contagious. If I start the day in a bad mood, what is the likely effect on my family? Ripple effect, right? Exactly. My children will go to school in a bad mood. My husband will go to work in a bad mood, and it's going to kind of spread. Okay. And we said this, but it's a really very important hadith to remind ourselves again that oh Ali, shall I tell you what kind of person resembles me most in character? This is the Prophet speaking to Muhammad. It is the one amongst you who is most good-natured, who has the highest degree of clemency. Clemency means hilm, being easygoing, okay, in other words, who is the kindest towards his near relative, and the one who is most fair and equitable towards others than he is towards himself. Okay. So, it was very interesting. I was having a conversation with someone and I was talking about, the kind of pranks that the Prophet ﷺ used to play on children, the kind of games he would play. And they're looking at me in shock. They said, what? The prophets had a sense of humor? I said, yes, the Prophet and Imam Ali used to joke with each other all the time. And like it was revolutionary to this person because this is not what we hear. And we kind of take on this kind of seriousness ourselves, right? But it's not like that. People who are very spiritual are, they have a big sense of humor because they don't take themselves so seriously, right? So, first thing is adopt the stranger standard, right? How are you amongst other people outside? You need to be, remember, however we are outside, we need to be better than that at home, not worse than. You know what I mean? Okay. Secondly, and by the way, one of the very easy ways to do it, is to smile frequently. So I want everyone to look at each other and actually practice smiling. No, really, I'm not kidding you, by the way. Please do it. Okay. So we all know the ahadith about smiling. Okay. Your smile to your brother is a charity, we are told. Smiling brightens the face and makes other people happy. Now, very interestingly, lots of research on smiling. It turns out that when you smile, it's kind of like you have neurons that go on in your thing, which actually, and by the way, your brain cannot tell if it's a fake smile or a genuine smile, which is very interesting, right? So what this means is that even if you don't feel like smiling, so they actually did a study where they made people hold pens, so their face went like that. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, it changed their mood. Very interesting. And when others watch us, it changes their mood too, because we have mirror neurons in our body, right? So this is what we mean by emotion contagion, that when others see us, they feel like smiling too. You've all done that, right? When people yawn, you feel like yawning, right? Yeah. When people are smiling, you feel like smiling, okay? So, I always, like when my kids were young, I would literally frequently ask myself, am I a blessing to my family or a trial? Because sometimes, honestly, mother's a trial, right? In the sense, if mother's in a bad mood, mother needs this, mother needs that, right? And we have plenty of reasons, by the way. I don't doubt that we have plenty of reasons. But here's the thing. This is for ourselves as well as for other people, right? We are the first beneficiaries of this, okay? Second, train your attention to focus on strengths. What am I saying? Train your attention. In other words, this will not happen automatically. The default position of the human brain is to focus on faults, is to focus on negative things. And there's very good reason. We don't have time right now to go into it, but Allah has created the body well. In order to kind of beat this, we have to be intentional about looking for good rather than automatically looking at things that are not going right. And there's a lovely narration from Nabi Isa alayhi salam, which says that he passed a carcass of a dog, and all his disciples were kind of holding their nose and saying how putrid the smell, and Nabi Isa alayhi salam said, oh, how beautifully white his teeth are. Right? This is what you mean. It's not about, sometimes we think that being positive means denying what is happening, right? It's not about denying. It's about what am I focusing on, right? So all of us, can we have a salawat? So all of us have good qualities and challenging qualities, right? And that's what we want. By the way, this is what we want from God, right? And this is what he says, that you do a little bit, I'll forgive all you. I'll overlook everything. He is Sariul Riza. which means he's very easily pleased. He's very easy to overlook all our faults. And we are asked to kind of adopt the akhlaq of Allah, right? So what that means is that instead of, and as mothers, we are like, one of the big things in this world is anxiety, OCD. Like, we so control oriented. We want everything our own way. So what that means is that our families bear the brunt of that, because we want everything. And I always bring up my dishwasher, so I will do so again. That if our dishwasher is not loaded exactly the way it is, we lose it. Now we have to ask ourselves, first of all, is there any fairy inside checking how your dishes are loaded? No, there isn't. I promise you, I've checked. Okay. What is it costing your relationships? What is that kind of behavior costing your relationships? Is your home a peace when you behave like that? I had one mother who was telling me, oh, I can't stand, mess, and I can't stand, when kids make a mess. And I said, yeah, I like order too, but I've kind of trained myself to overlook it, right? She said, no, while the kids are eating, I pick up their plates and I'm like cleaning while they're eating. And I'm like, please stop, stop. And I can see myself in that, right? All of us, we like order because we are so tired and we just don't want to keep cleaning. But here's the thing, we have to ask ourselves, what is it costing us? So train your attention to focus on the positive, by the way. And again, lots of research on this, that when we are using, so as soon as, there's this one writer who says that as soon as you kind of, your mind goes there, like you're upset with someone and you have, this is what happens, right? You're upset with someone and like your mind will give you 100 reasons why they're like the worst person ever. Okay. And he said at that point, you need to stop yourself. Okay. Because again, the more you kind of let these thoughts go unchecked and take root, they take root. And then your mind becomes really good at that, because we become what we practice, basically, right? So when we are practicing, looking and having this lawyer on our shoulder, which is giving us a lot of evidence of why we are upset at someone and why we are right to be upset at someone, it's giving us evidence we are right, but we cannot be happy, because that's the opposite of peace, right? Because we have no control over it. So we're busy giving out mental tickets to people, like how meter maids give tickets if you're parked illegally. Now imagine that your mind is a meter maid that keeps giving tickets. Oh, they didn't do this right. Oh, they didn't do that right. They didn't say this to me. Mental ticket, mental ticket. You understand what I'm saying, right? And what you're doing, you're just building resentment in yourself. Okay, the opposite of peace. So what this guy says is that it's a matter of practice. When you're having trouble getting along with someone, a simple first step is to sit down quietly and recall how many times that person has given you support, or whatever, positive things there are about the person. You are using positive memories to drive out negative ones before they have a chance to crowd together and form a mob, which is basically what resentment is. You understand, right? That when you are resentful of someone, your mind has become really good at showing all the ways and that what is wrong with that person. Okay. And when we do that with family members, obviously the problem is that in relationship psychology, we have this thing called negative sentiment override. What does that mean? So in every relationship, we have good, little things that are positive and some things that are not so positive, right? And when we have a habit of kind of focusing on the negative and doing things which are irritating to people, for example, it's like taking money out of our emotional bank account. And when enough of that happens, we get into a phase called negative sentiment override. What that means is that little things become big deal. You know what I'm saying, right? That something, say if a person has a strong relationship and somebody who has a weak relationship or a stressed relationship at that point, the same thing will annoy this person a lot more than that person. You know what I'm saying, right? So how do we kind of uh, you know uh, thing it is by having these little rituals. So very importantly, there are four times in the day where you have to be intentional in how you relate to your family members. Just relax for the rest of the time, but just it's 4 moments and it doesn't take time. Okay. The first thing is when you first greet each other. First greet each other. The first time you say salam to each other, how are you? Are you smiling? Are you positive? Are you a grumpalam? Okay, very important. The second time is when you're leaving for the day. So people are going to work, people are going out of the house, people are going to study, whatever the thing is, you are separating for the time being. And why is this so important? Because again, that moment of separation is going to create memories for the whole day. You know what I'm saying? So that moment has to be very, very pleasant. The third moment is when you meet together again at the end of the day, right? When you first walk into the house, again, again, this has to be intentional. Why? Because if you are walking into the house carrying the day's stressors with you, this is not going to be possible, right? So when you enter the house, imagine that it is a sacred space that you are entering, okay? So number 3 and number 4 is bedtime. When the day is done and when you are, kind of sleeping for the night. So just think of it as 4 minutes that you are investing in your relationship to build a peaceful home. Okay. I'm going to just say a quick story. So I don't know, some of you may have heard this. It's the story of the trouble tree. So the story goes like this, that, somebody picked up this guy who was a carpenter and brought him home, came to his house. And before this carpenter entered the house, he kind of stood for a minute and he was like very, very stressed and his face was wrinkled. And then he just paused for a minute and there was a tree outside his house and he just did something. And then when he walked into the house, he was like a completely different person. Okay. And so this person who was with him couldn't, so when they were leaving again and they were going home, this person asked him, what did you do? Like, what was that? He said, oh, that's my trouble tree. So when I come home from work, I'm very stressed. There's a lot happening. I'm in a bad mood. But those troubles do not belong inside my house. And so what I do is I hang them up on my trouble tree. Right. And the next morning, when I leave for work, I just pick up all my troubles and I go to work, with my troubles from work. And the funny thing, though, is that the troubles seem to have shrunk during the night. They're not quite as big as they were when I hung them up. Isn't that beautiful? So I've really written a lot about this. I've spoken a lot about this, have a trouble tree outside your house. One of the practices that we're meant to do when we enter the house is say salam, right? Whether or not somebody is there or not, salam alaikum. So who are we greeting? And the greeting is, the salam is a greeting of peace, isn't it? So lots of hadiths on this. The Prophet ﷺ said, I swear to Allah in whose hand my life is, that you cannot attain heaven and eternal happiness unless you have faith. And you cannot have faith unless you love each other. Should I not guide you towards some task as a result of which love and friendship will be created amongst you? So in other words, secret to Jannah is what? Jannah is basically eternal peace, right? Unlike the world, which is imperfect and transitory, Jannah is a place of eternal peace. Okay? So he's saying that you cannot reach there unless you have faith, and you cannot have faith unless you have love. And now he's giving you the clue how to create love between people. They answered yes. The Prophet ﷺ said, so salute each other. In other words, say salam to each other openly and clearly. What a beautiful and simple way of thinking. And he also said, when you meet each other, then initiate the greeting, okay, even if the other person's in a bad mood, and embrace. In other words, touch each other, When you separate from each other, then depart with seeking forgiveness. Seeking forgiveness, in other words, let things go. And by the way, physical touch, extremely important, as between husband and wife, obviously, but even children, when after they grow up a certain, like teenagers, teenage boys, not easy to hug. I always say, how do you hug a porcupine? Right? However, it's very important for them because human touch has a lot of healing. When we get stressed, one of the ways to kind of de-stress yourself, emotional regulation, is by the practice of touching. So, I strongly recommend full body hugs, okay, especially with your spouses when you meet. It takes between 6 to 20 seconds for your physiology to change. 6 to 20 seconds. And if you're not used to it, 6 seconds seems like an eternity. And especially if you're mad at each other, it seems like a double eternity, right? However, this is the key to kind of letting things go and reconnecting. It is so important, okay? So we said 4 times: morning, leaving, meeting again, and bedtime. Doable?
Yes.
Okay, promise? Good, okay. And then I'm just going to do one more. Okay, affection we already talked about. By the way, again, a lot of ahadis on affection, that when a husband and wife touch, it's like, again, their sins fall off, right? Everything that Allah has told us to do that is good for us has barakah in it. So double. Here we get sawab, and up there we get sawab, okay? So we just need to be kind of intentional. And the last thing, appreciation. What does appreciation mean? Appreciation means to actually first notice that somebody is doing something which is on the right track, or something that, is right as opposed to wrong. And number 2, that you express it verbally. Very, very important, both parts of it, right? Now, what happens there? There's no time to go into it, but appreciation, like I call it, and I've written about it, you can check out the blog, the 60-second secret to transforming your relationship. 60-second secret to transforming your relationship. And I don't say that lightly, like there's a lot of research on that. One of the ways to completely transform any relationship, whether whoever you're in conflict with, is to start noticing what you like about them, and express it to them. It will create love. It will allow you to remind yourself, when people are appreciated, they blossom, they thrive. Again, it is a matter of what you're focusing on. When you focus on people's strengths, when you appreciate them, they will grow. They will grow as people, and you will grow as a person. It's said that when somebody gives a compliment, this is in research, right? When 2 people are watching the compliment, they get the benefit too. They get the benefit too. This is how Allah has created our bodies, to be in sync with the orders that He's given us. Okay, so appreciation, and of course, we're reminded that from Hadith, that one who does not show gratitude to people has not shown gratitude to Allah. So very important. Generally we think, but they have to do this. Yeah, of course. If my husband doesn't take out the garbage, what else is he going to do? Okay, so we kind of take it as it's our birthright. Okay. Now, this is a challenge for everyone. Go home and notice something that your spouse, children, whoever you live with, is already doing, that you think, of course, they should do this, right? And express some gratitude for them. Express some appreciation for that. Just please try it for a week. And honestly, I'm not kidding you. Write to me if it doesn't work. Okay? Salawat. So I call all of these things OTL, opportunities to love. Okay. And the challenge to myself and to everyone here is that we need to find at least 3 out of everything we've talked about. And inshallah, the thing will be on YouTube, so you can remind yourself, right? Pick at least 3 OTLs a day. Now, nothing that I've talked about, does it take more than 30 seconds? Anything that I've talked about. By the way, one thing I did not talk about, which was eating together, which does take more than 30 seconds, but inshallah, at some other point. So, and do it intentionally, do it consistently, and do not wait for the other person. One of the biggest challenges in our relationships today is that we have this mentality of 50-50. You know what I mean? Okay. Anyone who's been married here more than 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, okay. Is that true? No, it is not true, okay? So ask people who have happy marriages over the long term. It is, and research shows this, right? That people who are about to get divorced talk about 50-50. People who are in long-term happy marriages do not talk about 50-50. They wake up wanting to give 100%. So please don't write to me and say, but what about him? I don't want to hear that because I already know. I can't change my spouse, I can't change my kids, so I can't tell you how, right? But if a single person, right, you heard that it takes 2 people to make a relationship. You heard that? Okay, another lie, by the way. Can one person destroy a relationship? Yes, absolutely. So does it not make sense that one person can also improve a relationship? It works both ways. And who do we have? We only have control over ourselves. So let's start with ourselves. How many OTLs? 3 a day. Okay. And what is an OTL? Opportunity to love. Okay. Alhamdulillah.